On. All right, we're recording. We're back, party people. It's a Sunny ratio. We're building on Bitcoin, and today I have quite possibly one of my most favoritist human beings on earth. We got Kyle Kemper, brother from another mother. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, Sonny, I'm fantastic. And you also are one of my most favoritist people in the whole wide world. And I mean, gosh,
When do we meet?
we've been on this journey a while
I was
together,
gonna
eh?
say, when do we meet? I feel like it was in Decentral, maybe not.
I feel like we met at the Money show in Toronto at the convention center. I was running a CA Vertex booth with Joseph David and the CA Vertex team, and you were working with Buttercoin and were a community organizer within the Toronto space. And that was probably 2014, I would
Good
say.
memory. Good memory.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that. Yes. Tell people what Sea of Vertex was, because that gives me these like nostalgic kind of feel good vibes.
CA Vertex was Canada's largest and oldest Bitcoin exchange. It was one of the world's like first Bitcoin exchanges. It was founded in I think 2012. And it was like before it, people were literally meeting at Denny's to they were coordinating in-person meetings towards exchanging cash for Bitcoin. And I remember the founder was like, must be a better way. And so he built an exchange, and it was, phenomenally successful. And, ultimately we ended up selling the company to Coinsetter. And then very soon after that acquisition took place, Coinsetter got sold to Kraken. And, a lot of the team all kind of moved there. But it was a critical piece within the Canadian Bitcoin story, and it enabled, it was where most of the OG kind of Canadian tribe, were definitely familiar. The competitor at the time was Quadriga, which was Gerald Cotton, rest in peace, who launched that one, and that one went down kind of in a ball of flames. Whereas, Sea Vertex, like, it also suffered from a couple hacks, but they internalized all the losses instead of putting them on clients, which was really, really noble and integral. So yeah, yes, and I was the chief. I was involved in marketing and business development, and we rolled out 11 Bitcoin ATMs, mostly over Southern Ontario. But we, had a great plan towards expanding. But again, I remember like back in the day there were some hacks, and those really like spooked, the leadership team. And it was like, it's tough business, like, being responsible for so much money and other people's money. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I
So
remember those days. So did you end up working for Kraken or did you leave the
So
company
I
before?
I I kind of oversaw the transition to I worked with Coinsetter, and Jaron over there, and then I worked with Jaron and Marshall, and then worked with Kraken. I worked with David Waxman on the whole, like, PR announcement around that, and then was kind of like an advisor business development role within Kraken. And then I remember being at a Bitcoin conference in Miami, and I think 2016, I think it was, maybe 2017, one of those years. And I got like pulled into as a result of a hackathon. I started this social wallet project to try and upgrade Change Tips solution and basically build a Venmo using off-chain transactions for Bitcoin, using social rails and social identity profiles to make just Bitcoin like hyper usable. And I went super deep on that. And as a result of me going super deep on that, I kind of like, parted ways with Kraken. In retrospect, it probably wasn't, the best decision. I should have kept all the all the lines open because Kraken has turned into one of the leading financial institutions on the planet right now, and it's been wonderful to see all the success that they've had. And ultimately, ChangeTip, was we're building on top of their APIs. They didn't actually like the fact that I built like a new front end for them that was like hyper simple and straightforward. I think sometimes my characteristics of trying to like really like seeing things and then trying to make them happy, it create a little bit of friction and a little collision. But those are the journeys.
Yeah, man. So Kyle, I'm gonna put a link to our first interview that we did, I don't know, I want to say 3, 4 years ago, so that people can get a bit of the backstory and you don't need to go as deep. But just for those new listeners, people tuning in, I mean, do you want to maybe before even the Bitcoin thing, like what did your life look like? Who are you? You want to kind of give the audience a bit of an
Totally.
intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up in Ottawa. I come from like a little bit of a political family. My mother was, she was married to Pierre Trudeau. So she was a former first lady kind of growing up. She after separating from Pierre, she met my father and, I was born and had come more a private life, but always kind of pretty close to the political circles. My father is in real estate and had some restaurants as well. And I studied entrepreneurship, marketing, law, and some philosophy. I went into university at Dalhousie University out in the East Coast. And following university, I worked for BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, and their venture capital division. It's one of the largest portfolios in Canada, over $1 billion, in AUM. That was an incredible experience of learning the back end of venture capital and how it works and the process by which, especially, a very large, structured VC like BDC. And while working there, I met some entrepreneurs who were in the mobile space doing BlackBerry enterprise solutions and enterprise apps. And so I ended up working on some really incredible mobile data capture, um, enterprise slash consumer kind of apps. And that was my first real exposure into the world of app development and working with, the CTO and the coders and the developers on building on a project. That also took me down to California a lot, and that was my first kind of exposure to San Francisco and Silicon Valley. I remember like, bombing so hard at a pitch where I was trying to pitch like the business we were trying to raise capital. I remember like lock freezing up, locking. It was so embarrassing. I just like, I tried to like read it. It was just so bad. But that's it's okay. It was my first time, and literally the next day we did a presentation in front of like 300 people, and it was absolutely stellar and incredible. And we ended up getting some investment as a result of it. And so it's like the lesson just keep going. And I was very grateful to experience that California, Silicon Valley, Bay Area energy and connections. And honestly, like I ended up moving down there for at one point I was in Ottawa and I was just like, I, nothing's really going here. It was like 2010. I just wasn't feeling it. So I jumped in my car and I drove to San Francisco. And I arrived to San Francisco and I didn't even have a place to stay. I didn't know where I was going to be staying or what I was going to be doing. And I ended up like, going to this big wireless conference called CTIA and went to a party on a ship that was parked at Pier 38, and it was this amazing 190-foot kind of cruise ship or U.S. Coast Guard cutter, like a really North Pacific serious ship. And I ended up sleeping on the ship that night. And then in the morning, I met the owner. And like, man, Kurt, this boat is awesome. Like, we just had a crazy party on it the night before. I was like, can I live here? He's like, you seem like a cool guy. Like, okay. And I'm like, well, how much would it be? He's like, oh, this room's $500 a month. I was like, 500 a month? It's like at the time it was like 1,500 a month for like a shared room in San Francisco. And so I lived on this gorgeous ship for, 6 months. I remember that was the first year that the Giants won the won the baseball series, the World Series, and it was just an incredible experience. And as a result of those times, like, I forged deep friendships with a lot of people who, you know, are kind of titans of Silicon Valley today. Just being in that zone at that time. And yeah, so then after that, I moved back to Canada, and the technology stuff, it was kind of like insular, especially in Canada. I was kind of like, just wasn't feeling it. Plus, I was running out of money, and the company ran out of money, and like couldn't pay me anymore. So I ended up working at my family restaurant called the Clock Tower, which was a brew pub, and I just started serving serving and bartending. And man, like I would recommend that to everybody, like as a part of a journey, because you have to deal with absolutely everybody who comes in. And being a brew pub in Ottawa and downtown, like next to the Parliament, next to all the embassies, everything, it's a pretty casual place. We would see like the whole spectrum of people coming in, from the politicians to the lobbyists to like straight up like the alcoholics to like the tourists, like everybody. It's just such a clash. And when you're working in service, like you just have to deal with everybody and talk to everybody. And I loved it. And I'm just a kind of a naturally outgoing, communicative person. And I listened and would talk, and it would be great. And it kind of helped as well that my father was one of the owners on the place. So that, added a other kind of bizarre degree to it all. And, when I was working there one night, a man walked in and he's like, I have 50,000 Bitcoin. And I was like, excuse me? I'm like, tell me more. And that kind of concluded. And I'll just say, before I first learned about Bitcoin when I was working with the technology company before, and we were video editing, and at the time, like you'd make your video and then you'd press like render, and it would take a long time for the actual like video to kind of export and be done. And while it was rendering, like I remember on another computer, and this was 2010. This is 2010. On another computer, we're looking at Bitcoin, and just like kind of going through, and I just didn't connect. It just kind of wrote it off, but gave it a good look. But the first instinct was, don't really get this. But I was also very interested and seeking alternative solutions to the global central banking situation and the fiat money problem, and the cancer that in my opinion, is the central banks. And that came from like a deeper time back to like conspiracy world and not believing 9/11 or 7/7. And I remember Zeitgeist came out and showed like, the money masters and the manipulation happening behind the scenes. And so, when I first saw that Bitcoin, didn't get it. And then, I got some more impressions, but it wasn't until working in the bar that night that Johnny London came in and said all this that I really like had my, let's say, my orange pill moment where I was like, okay, this is really it. And I remember shortly after that, we had a business making like a little kind of a hobby side business doing custom iPhone cases. And somehow I got a message from btcquick.com, which was like an exchange, and they ordered an iPhone case. And I asked them, would you like to pay for that with Bitcoin? They're like, sure, happily. Like, how much would it be? I was like, half a Bitcoin. So my very first Bitcoin was I sold an iPhone case for half a Bitcoin. I didn't buy it, I didn't mine it. I literally earned it by selling a good and service that we made, which feels kind of like, I like that Genesis moment to it all. And and then I went really deep, and we ended up launching a Bitcoin ATM at the restaurant. Um, Word of the ATM in Ottawa, like got lots of press, CBC, all the local news. Big news about that. And then I got a call from my friend who was at the Senate of Canada, and they were studying Bitcoin as part of their Bitcoin, or no, the Banking, Trade, and Commerce Committee, the Senate Banking, Trade, and Commerce, the BTC Committee. And they were studying Bitcoin. And they asked if they could do a field trip to come see how it worked. And I ended up bringing it to the Senate, and they purchased $50 worth of Bitcoin. We had CA Vertex there. That's when I met CA Vertex. That's when I ultimately got a job with CA Vertex, was following that. And that kind of kicked off the journey. And then, we were at the Bitcoin Expo
Wait,
in
wait,
Toronto in 2014.
you said bring it. What was it? It was an ATM
We
machine, correct?
we brought the Bitcoin ATM
Right, right. I remember
to
that.
the
I mean, that
Senate
was like
floor.
a iconic, like kind of moment, right? For like
Right.
Canadian
Yeah.
Bitcoin history. Like I remember, I think I saw it on, wasn't it streamed or something? I
It
thought I
was streamed.
saw.
Oh yeah, it's out there. It's
So,
available. I mean, they
so,
had
so,
been
I, so,
studying.
so, like I said, I like to divide it in three parts, right? So one is your story, which we kind of covered there. Super fascinating, by the way. And yeah, love the background and service. And, I think my service job, does Blockbuster count as service? Yeah, right?
Definitely.
I worked at Blockbuster while doing engineering. I mean, I had my co-op work terms working in the oil fields and Xerox Research Center of Canada and
I
this and
had
that.
co-op
But
work
I
terms
did
too.
I did have one stint, I think like a year long at Blockbuster. So that was, that was interesting. And I got a flavor of what it's like to work with like people, like human beings. And I agree. I think early jobs like that are very formative and kind of enable you to,
Yeah, I
venture out
mean,
into
did
the
you
world.
did you have when you were in university, you said co-ops, you said you had like
I had
work.
co-ops, but those were dealing with engineers and, and like professional, like just
I
normal
did, I
people.
did, I did the same thing as part of my business degree. Was what
Right.
I had three terms. The first one, I went and shadowed an entrepreneur in Whistler, and he had a property maintenance business, so basically cleaning windows and carpets in Whistler during the winter. So I just looked at my schedule. I was like, oh my gosh, I can go to Whistler, ski and snowboard, and like check the university box. So did that, and then the next one, I worked in accounting for the world's number one water slide company, which is called ProSlide out of Ottawa. So that was like a real working in like, a corporate environment. I was like working in the accounting cubicle, and I realized like, so much respect for all the career people that do that, but it just was not like my zone. And then the third term, like we started a web development company and built websites, as part of all that dirty. Gosh,
And
what a
then at
time.
one point, so you meet this Johnny London character and he orange pills you. Maybe I'm mixing up your story with someone else's, but did he end up being a bad guy? Or
Oh
was he,
yeah.
did,
Oh yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I think a lot of people have stories like
completely
that too, right? Early
completely full of
Bitcoiners
shit.
were like,
Completely full of shit.
remember
Was
that show
like,
American Gladiator? Where yeah, that's kind of like intellectually speaking what Bitcoin felt like in the early days, right?
oh
Like you
yeah,
gotta
I
like
mean,
get like you brought up Quadriga. I don't even want to get into that, but like there's so many characters in the space during that time where you're just
well,
like dodging
and every
bullets.
gold rush is going to attract some bad actors. And it's like just because like he ended up being like, a lying, scamming fraudster, who cannot operate. And it was so early. Like, had he just not been such a liar and such a fraud, like he would have done so well. But in alcohol, drugs, along with being gifted, being like he was like kind of a pathological scammer liar. And so this was like my first experience with that. And I remember like going to, an accounting lawyer, and the accounting lawyer was like, you need to go talk to a criminal lawyer. And the criminal lawyer was like, you need to go. I never tell this to anybody. You need to go to the police right now and like say all this. So, went through that whole process and, was able to
Uh,
like,
So despite this guy turning out to be a bit of a
honorably
dud, what was it though about that? I guess you kind of touched on it, which is you were already looking for a solution outside of the central banking system. You'd
we
already
knew
had this deep
there's
down
a
realization.
mega issue. This is a civilizational challenge that we were dealing with of the central banks and the ability to print money, wage endless wars, and suppress humanity through the control of the money. Like, one of those quotes was, "I care not who you elect, so long as I control the money." I'm probably
By the way, what did Elon say yesterday?
I
End
don't
the
know.
Fed.
Oh, great.
He
Well,
said,
yeah,
I've always wanted
and,
to say
you
that.
know,
And then he said, end
and
the Fed.
Ron Paul was like, one of my great teachers, like,
Preach.
through his lessons, and he didn't kind of see Bitcoin properly and for a long time, but he inspired so many. And then when I saw it, I was like, okay, but it was really early. And like, I feel like Sonny, we have the gift that we see. And I saw like Bitcoin, this is going to change the entire world. Like this is the solution. And it's like, trying to like immediately, like I was an evangelist. Like, I would teach people how the Bitcoin ATM worked. I'd just give away Bitcoin like constantly all the time. Oh, there he is. Sweet Dr. Paul. Uh, that's Toshi Roundtable. I mean,
Yeah,
I met Dr. Paul this year finally at the Bitcoin conference, and he signed the back of the Kennedy pin for me,
I
and
love him. I love
so
him.
we
Yeah,
love him too
yeah. If it
much.
wasn't for going deep into his work prior to coming across Bitcoin, I would never, I don't think I would have taken Bitcoin seriously. So I love his message around gold and sound money and end the Fed and that stuff was like again very, very niche and kind of like weird to even talk about. Whereas now, like I said, like
Yeah,
Elon Musk, who's like Trump's like right hand man, is kind of going on blast about it. So quite a
and
coming of times, no?
things just take time, and
Time,
it's
yeah.
we got really excited, and we were like way ahead of the curve, like in the
Arguably too
life
ahead.
cycle of things,
Yeah.
we were super early, and I mean, I was like Anthony Diorio started the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada. I got elected as a director of that in 2014, and then he stepped down. And I became the executive director, and we, ran that for 5 years. Like educating the pension plans, government agencies, like whoever we could talk to about this technology, and it was kind of like a revolving door. Like you go in and you're out, and it's like and I don't know, people would like laugh at me and laugh at us. And like I remember talking to the Canadian Pension Plan, telling them to invest in Bitcoin to de-risk, like to insure against this outlier technology, and it wouldn't cost very much at the time. And they were like, yeah, they laughed at me, and they're like, there was too big of a reputational um, uh, risk for them to do that. And so, it's kind of a shame. It's kind of sad that that took place. But ultimately here we are, and now we're seeing this this wholesale adoption. And they've made horrible mistakes as well. Like I don't know the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, I think it was like invested $80 million into FTX, like when they wouldn't invest into Sea of Vertex or the Canadian businesses. But there's David and there's Anthony, and I'm not sure who's the other man there. You're muted.
Sorry, I had a little technical glitch, but that's Jeff. Yeah, he's one of the main team members in Matador. We
Okay,
were
great.
hanging out with Anthony recently, and yeah, you brought him up, and he's a hero, one of my heroes, actually standing beside another one of our heroes here, David Bailey, two icons in the industry. But no, I just wanted to bring up Anthony's picture because I think he's one of those guys that's just done a lot for the community. Put his neck out there well before it was popular to do so, and like I've said this many times on stage and in videos, but he's one of the people that really kind of deeply inspired me to take this industry seriously. So
Well, and
yeah, he's
then
a comic book.
you like,
Yeah.
and then you, then like we met, and then we started doing like the meetups in Toronto, and like growing them and growing them and growing them to the point where we were having like conferences, and then then Tracy, like we collaborated with her and like on the Futurist, and like and that ended up they ended up just selling the Futurist conference, after incredible runs. Like, gosh, it was what a time of like really interesting innovators coming together and exploring and collaborating, and like just the meetups and the hackathons and like the communities. And gosh, it was what days. And now to see where we are, like at this stage, it's here we are like for me, this is 12 years into this whole thing, and it's just amazing to see, how far it's come. But also at the same time, there's an incredibly long way to go. Bitcoin has not achieved its vision of being peer-to-peer electronic cash. There's been some detours, but that's the thing. It's like, the road is always filled with detours and flat tires and hiccups and bumps and breakdowns, but we just can't keep going forward. And one thing is the Bitcoin network, it just keeps going on and still to this day has never been hacked.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So as we switch kind of gears into the second part of the story, you started talking about Bitcoin, your involvement with the Canadian government, being part of CA Vertex, Canada's first Bitcoin exchange. So where does your story take you next? I mean, and then you had the aha moment with Bitcoin and the funny story with Johnny London. But then, what was there something that kind of like deepened? I mean, it's one thing to have an aha moment and get orange pilled, but it's another to dedicate your life to this like cause, right? Which has been a big part of, I think, what people like you and I have done is we put our, flag in the ground. We're like, we're here to stay and we're gonna give and do whatever it takes, whether it's events or building companies or doing whatever. But what deepened your kind of resolve in the space, and then take us through your Bitcoin journey, and then
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, one of the things is I started having children too. So it's like,
Mm.
I never like, there's a lot of people in this space that, that made a good bet and like became very successful as a result of making, good bets. Um, I like I was when I learned about it, I was working at the restaurant like just to pay the bills, and then I had my daughter Amelia like in 2013, and then like I had my son Johnny Wolf in 2017, and then now I've got six children. So like I'm like the real like heart of this is trying to make sure the world is going to be great for them, and that we can kind of move away from this you know, slavery system of fiat money and move into a more equitable abundance solution in Bitcoin and decentralized money.
So you brought up the zeitgeist, like just in passing, but like that was another one of those like documentaries, movies that I watched that had a big kind of outsized impact on my worldview. There's a guy in that where they talk about this guy named Jack Fresco. I don't know if you remember, but he's kind of provided as like a person who's working on something of what might be a solution to kind of a lot of the problems we face. I don't know if you remember this Jack Fresco. So Peter brings him up. And Jack Fresco used to talk about this thing called uh like post scarcity, right? So to this world that we'd eventually move towards where, scarcity wouldn't be like a thing where you could just have an abundance. And now if you look at a lot of what, with Bitcoin, but with AI, with robotics, even people like Elon Musk, they talk about, when you introduce this kind of AI and automation, you take it to the end. Yes, there's this doom and gloom where they might kill us and we all end up like robot slaves. But there's another vision, which is that we set ourselves free, right? The cost of labor drives to zero, and the cost of things drive towards zero as a result of it. And I could see how, anyway, so where am I going with all this? Is that one of my big kind of like aha moments was that if you wanted to have if you wanted to live in a like an abundant world, you needed a scarce money supply. Like that was one of my things because like the central bank, because they don't have a scarce money supply, it's almost like this vehicle for draining us of our life force, right? Where like the money I save under my bed or whatever it is, they can kind of siphon it, the value of it away from me by being able to print an infinite amount. The Bitcoin story, a
Absolutely.
lot of it has to do with this 21 million cap. And I just love how it kind of comes full circle back to like what Zeitgeist, what these guys were talking about. Like, I remember I seeing Occupy Wall Street. I was like, oh my God, these guys really resonate with what I'm feeling. But the answer that they provided, like this socialist kind of like outcome, was not necessarily the right answer, right? The answer actually, in my view, is something like Bitcoin, something like,
Agreed. And
scarce money source.
one of the other and like the scarce money combined with accountability and like, having that ledger because like in the more centralized systems become, they ultimately just become more secretive and more corrupt. And that's just like, the nature. So, through these decentralized alternatives with the blockchain, with systems of account and record that imbue responsibility and just remove the opportunity for fraud and deception, uh, that changes the playing field. That can enable us to enter that new phase, and that shifting into this new age. So yeah, I mean, I wholly agree and feel that. And that was, I wouldn't say there was a single moment that was like, aha. But I was also just like I've said before, I was this evangelist. Like, I probably activated more people with wallets than, there might be a handful of individuals who have done it more than myself. Of actually like, taking the time to set people up with wallets, get them their first coins, show them the ropes, like teaching that. I worked with the company Change Tip, like give away so much Bitcoin and just showed them, trying to teach them, like, really pushing this. It was more than number go up philosophy. It was like, this is the technology that, radically changes it. And so, on this journey, I just kind of like, kept exploring. And, from the association side to working, like I worked with a company called Data Wallet that was part of the 2017 ICO run, which was like, okay, what happens when we start taking control of our own data and owning our keys to our data? Very interesting, very big deep dive within that. And then looking into wallets as well, because, at the core, everybody needs a wallet. So, I started the social wallet, and then like I launched the Swiss Key project, and collaborated with Tangem. We made these fit that are like, leveraging their physical crypto wallets, which I still believe are one of the hugest unlocks that haven't, been realized yet. But I'm looking forward to, helping realize that, and just like collaborating. And I think one of, the major unlocks that I had along this journey was the concept of radical collaboration and weaving in parties. And in order to help others achieve their goals of where they want and add value, you need to know what it is they're trying to do and what kind of value they're trying to achieve. And having worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and startups and and different groups, it's like, I've been really blessed to have a very large network of people all over. And for me, I just want to kind of understand like what people are working on, what some of the milestones that are kind of after, and like where they ultimately want to get, so that as you continue to go out there, you can start kind of weaving and connecting, and really realizing that as opposed to like out competing one another, like the truest like measure of massive victory, and this was said by Eric Voorhees, like an absolute legend, was instead of out competing one another, we must out collaborate one another. That's going to be, that's going to be, it's not even really out collaborating. It's just encouraging massive collaboration so that, everybody can win. You can create not just win-win solutions, but actually like win to the winth power, win to the power of win, like exponential winning, as as individuals, as communities, and as a society. So
Cool, man. I know. I mean, and Kyle, you've had obviously a deep impact on my journey as well, right? We've been friends for this time. I mean, I remember, was it even like 2 years ago? I was feeling a bit not down and out, but like, kind of feeling maybe like my conference attendee days were behind me and whatnot. But then you forced me to come out to Bitcoin conference in Miami, and that was another one of those like big kind of turning points for me. Is it was just to be there and to, by then Trump hadn't, joined the orange pill wagon yet, but RFK was there, and he was somebody again that you brought to my attention. And let's talk about that. Yeah, I don't want to. So people out there, Kyle and I have a show called Love and Freedom Show. You can check it out at loveandfreedomshow.com. We went on a bit of a like a I don't know, like a 14-day, I want to say maybe 3 week like a we just did
Mhm.
like daily content where
It
we were
was, it was,
talking
and it was,
about
and it was literally around like the trucker time too.
yeah,
That was like,
yeah.
we needed, this was our outlet towards like, we had a lot of energy and a lot to say. And, so we just started creating.
Yes, yes, I love that. And that was but help people maybe color in a little bit of the like what's been happening with Kyle since the last 3, 4 years, right? So there's the Bitcoin side that's obviously been predominant and you've done a lot of stuff there, everyone knows. But talk a little bit about, kind of what happened in the last few years. Again, I don't want to go into the weeds, but just
Yeah.
just so people have color.
Totally. So, I mean, COVID happened too. So, like, all of a sudden, like, this great scam, this great pandemic was, in my opinion, others can view it however they like, but from my opinion, it was like one of the greatest psyop false flags of our time. And, wrought a massive amount of destruction and wealth transfer. And, one of the people who stood up during it was RFK Jr. And like, he was very courageous. And then, leading up in the last election, like, he declared that he was going to be running for president. And I remember before he even ran for president, saw some of us, I was like, my gosh, this guy would be an amazing president. And so when he announced he was running, I was just like, I'm all in. And so I shifted from like, the crypto work and really focused on, American electoral politics and getting into the campaign. And, I worked all over his campaign, from merchandise to events to branding to messaging to creative to like, to being out there. I had my RV, my 36-foot RV that I turned into the Kennedy Across America bus, and before it was the Blockchain Across America bus. And we toured all over America with my family, with my wife, with the kids, like exploring and just incredible experiences and meeting all these people. And like, and policy and politics are something that are like, are within me. So I leaned in heavy, and what an incredible kind of experience. And it was a shift. And I've also, like, in my career arc or life arc, I've done worked in a lot of different industries, but I never worked in like this type of industry. So spending a year and a half doing that, learned an awful lot about that, made an incredible you know Rolodex of connections and friends all across the nation. And and to the point now where Bobby declared that he's running. There it is. That was in Washington. Where are you getting that one from? But yeah, it's good times. Hey, we were all over. And, then Bobby ultimately endorses Trump, and now he's basically the president of health. And there's this mission to make America healthy again.
Couple of threads I want to just capture.
Yeah,
So at that event, the Bitcoin conference, RFK went on stage and talked about what his orange pilling moment was. Do you remember what that was?
Canadian truckers.
Ah, talk about it.
Oh, I mean, Bobby mentioned all about the truckers and how, like, the Canadian banks confiscated, shut down, froze bank accounts of the Canadian protesters. And, that really imparted upon him the need for uncensorable, inclusive money that, a government can't deny you access to the financial system. And Bitcoin represents the solution to that. So that was one of his orange pill moments. And he had excellent people around him, including like David Bailey, like, helping advise on good policy. And ultimately, all that policy, like, Trump kind of adopted as his policy. And honestly, a lot of the things that Bobby was openly campaigning on are now kind of part of the policy of the administration. It's truly amazing.
It's nice how everything connects.
It's great how it all connects. And
No,
now it's like,
it's just like, and
I
looking
mean, it's
forward, you can
divine.
never do so. But like what's Steve Jobs' famous quote? But like looking back, it's just like wow, like we were part of all these like movements, right? I remember you showed up on Alex Jones's. Remember you did like you on for a while there. You were on every major podcast, and
Hey,
you did
Alex
Tucker. You
Jones, I
did
was
you
on
did
Tucker.
Tucker.
I was like,
Yeah, so you were on. Okay, so I'm getting a bit carried away with all my excitement, but maybe bring us back home, yeah? So what's next? I mean, if you want to talk about more about Bitcoin, please do so. If not, let's maybe switch gears into what are you passionate about today? What are some of the projects? I mean, you're talking about
So
RFK, but that's also now
yeah, so like
in the rearview mirror.
following the election, I banded together with a bunch of the campaign people, and we ended up launching Club Maha. We launched this Maha token on Ethereum. It helped fuel grassroots activism right up into the election, a little bit beyond. And then we started the Club Maha podcast with my friend Dustin Stockton and Ian Carroll. And we've done 12 episodes. This week will be our 13th episode. And,
And just for those who don't know, tell people about this guy because this guy is literally all over my feed, like on
oh
every
yeah, I
social
mean,
media.
so Ian Carroll, he was doing all these like awesome TikTok videos, like, really like shining light into like who the final boss is and like private
He's
equity
so
and
good. Like some of
how
the
the
best
grocery
content
stores work,
online.
like
Yeah.
deep dive
So good.
investigative journalism, like
Yeah.
really, really nailing it. And I was like, man, this guy's awesome. I cannot wait. I remember sending him a bunch of messages and never getting in or like respond, never got any response. And then, we were up at Rescue the Republic in DC, a big event. He was speaking there, and I had the bus there, and I was with my friend Bobby Bailey, who we also like recorded like the whole campaign trail. So we've got all this footage, and I think ultimately there's going to be like I don't know a series or a film or something, but like we got some amazing footage from this whole thing. And in this, we captured Ian's speech and story, and Bobby ended up putting out this amazing video of Ian that he put on his feed. It got like I don't know, probably 5, 10 million views, like talking about the info war and media, etc. But after that, like Ian became a great friend, and then we launched this podcast together, and so he's like, he got into a really visible exchange with Elon Musk where he shared like an incredible amount of information about very touchy subjects. He's shining lots of light out there. And I mean, at the end of the day, he's just also like a really kind of rad dude. And he's someone that, I'm really grateful to be able to collaborate with.
So you
And
guys had how many viewers you said last week or on the last episode?
and last episode we had 50,000 kind of viewers. The one before that we had 100,000. Like,
That is
over these
nuts.
12 episodes, we've definitely had probably maybe like, plus the after watches. And it's also now on I think it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on these different channels. I mean, we got to be over probably 2 million views. And we're talking all about make America healthy again. And, it's focusing really like, on what does Maha mean, make America healthy again. It's like, for us, it's food, it's medicine, it's media, it's soil and agriculture, it's the air, obviously the vaccines, informed consent. For me also, it's finance too, and like moving away from the unhealthy financial system that we're dealing with and towards the more decentralized, accountable, responsible system that Bitcoin can enable. And so I've got that going on. Also, like we got the Canadian election, so trying to I would like to see more Bitcoin crypto policy coming in from like represented, but it doesn't seem like that. But we've got some actions to take there. And I'm very very keen on block space right now, and our friend Antoine, we're working with him towards this mission of let's fill the blocks, because I believe that the blockchain and the data that gets served on the blocks it's forever. Like we just minted a song onto the blockchain last night. It used up 3.7 megabytes, basically a whole block, to put a song for all time directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain. And I don't think everything will go on the Bitcoin blockchain, but Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, like if you think about the blockchain, like this endless public record, basically a scroll that's always moving. And there's an opportunity to place and plug data into it as we go. And so I really like, I don't know, I think there's something huge here.
Can you hear it?
Not properly.
All right. Anyways, thought I'd give people a little flavor of the song you're talking about. Okay, cool. Yes, big fan of
Yeah,
Antoine.
and then like and suddenly like we've been talking about Matador and like the opportunity for what MicroStrategy has done and enabling access towards the larger public markets and creating public vehicles that have Bitcoin holding and support the Bitcoin ecosystem industry. We've seen lots of other public companies around blockchain, around mining. But I think at the core, like the value proposition of what Matador is doing, just insanely strong and bullish, and it's something that honestly all investors should probably get some access to, in their portfolio. It's and now it's they're just in this arc of time from 2013. We're so early on this to now we're actually seeing like this wholesale nation states beginning to adopt it. So I mean, GameStop just started adding Bitcoin to its balance sheet. Countries are going to be adding it to their national balance sheet, to central banks, to treasuries. Pension plans are going to be adding it. More individuals will be adding it. There's, I still like to anybody just recommend just dollar cost average and just, set it and forget it. Keep acquiring it and, hodl your savings, spend all your checkings and give all with love. And you try and choose Bitcoin and use Bitcoin as opposed to just treating it like a speculative instrument that number goes up. It's so much more than just number goes up. But for like your savings and for your investment portfolios, it absolutely is an excellent position to be holding. Not financial advice, and this is wisdom. So yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love the passion. Love the passion.
And then there's also all this AI stuff that's going on right now. And, I'm very keen on agentic AI and how we can leverage AI agents to radically simplify and streamline, processes towards achieving the result that traditionally it would have taken, potentially hundreds of thousands or thousands of hours of human time can now be done, in mere seconds, minutes, hours, compared to it. So, we're just at there's so much collision of all these different technologies, and to be able to weave them together back to that radically collaborative mindset of where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve, thinking strategically about how we get there. And and I like I've said, I'm kind of just here to serve and here to create value. I want to create value for myself and for my family, and be able to live a good life and create opportunities and seize opportunities, but also it's assist others in achieving their end goals and end results. And sometimes it takes just open discussion and maybe a little bit of outside the box thinking towards solving problems, because not everyone's necessarily aware of the state of our exponential technologies and how they can be leveraged to break the assumptions on which a lot of the markets have functioned. Um, you know, Someone who's been in finance for 25, 30 years, like those old lessons, like some of them, the wisdom applies, but the technology that we're dealing with now means the approaches can greatly vary and differ. And the real winners are going to be the ones that embrace and utilize and take advantage of the alpha access and knowledge for these solutions.
Yes, love it. Love it. Hey, I was gonna say maybe close us out, give us some final remarks, thoughts. And then after that, I wanted to share a little something that kind of sits at the high the bridge between Bitcoin and AI, just something I've been tinkering with. But tell us, like, what's the kind of the lay of the land? I mean, now you and I were at the Washington inaugural. Maybe talk a little bit about that. That I don't think I'm ever gonna forget that day. That was that was a good feeling. Let's put it that way.
I'm to see the state of how far we've come, Sonny, and like to the fact that the best ball of all the balls of the inauguration, well, there are the two best balls in my opinion were crypto ball, incredible. All the leaders from around the world, came to many of the leaders came together in Washington to celebrate. And David Bailey, bless his soul, for cooking that up and just putting on an amazing show. And then the Maha Ball, which was the 2 nights later, truly amazing as well. And just to see Bitcoin is Bitcoin is squarely center view. It's no longer on the fringes. It's here. We're about to go through, mass, a level of adoption in big systems and big companies that it takes time to get there. But that's happening, and we're getting to that point now. And I don't see it's slowing down in any way. It's just going to continue, and I look forward to, the upgrading of our payment systems and seeing more payments happening that leverage crypto. That's coming. That's coming. And yeah, I'm very, very stoked, happy, bullish, grateful, to have been here, and stoked to see as well how far the industry, how far you've come, how far others have come, and what's all the innovation and creation that's taking place. And Kathy Woods is one of my I would say, like, I listened to a podcast of her the other day, and gosh, she is such a wise luminary on the whole space. And she did a great job of summarizing to the point where, you know innovation is creation, and now's the time to just start building and putting it out there and trying. And a lot of, the rule sets are changing, they're dynamic, and it's time to explore, it's time to brainstorm, it's time to challenge, and create. So what are you creating? What are you building, Sonny?
What am I building? What am I creating? Good question. Lots of things, but maybe I'll just close us out last 5 minutes here, share a couple things. So I tweeted this out today, went super viral, 3 likes, 0 retweets. Bitcoin is the apex property of human civilization, digital energy transcending time, space, and tyranny. Ooh, very thought-provoking. Thank you, Sunny. Another tweet that, on the
Go,
AI
go
note.
retweet that one right now, because
Yes, yes,
that's
first
gold, baby.
retweet, baby. I've
We're
got to
gonna
make a
get
bit
you
of a
that
comeback
first
on Twitter.
retweet.
Your Twitter is 100x more interesting than mine, and you get a lot of engagement. I know you've got like a kind of a avid following. Um, Someone here who also has a avid following is Sam Altman. So he said here, just to put into perspective, like what's happening with AI. The ChatGPT launch 26 months ago was one of the craziest viral moments I'd ever seen. And by the way, this guy literally is one of the, I think, founders of Y Combinator, right? So the kind of the main investor behind Coinbase, Airbnb, blah blah blah. So him saying this is crazy enough. And we added 1 million users in 5 days. We added 1 million users in the last hour. Insanity. And by the way, I don't know if you're following this whole like what is it called? Ghibli? Have you been
I have
tinkering with
not.
Ghibli? Oh, this is like the new Ghibli. It's like a Japanese animation house. They just have a certain type of animation, and the internet's going wild. And you can use ChatGPT to make these Ghiblis. I've already made way too many to admit. But anyways, so ChatGPT is having another bit of an inflection point. Their new image generator is insane. Here's an example of something that I created this morning. So I had another super, super viral tweet that here, this one's even worse. This one's even worse. Anyways, let's not even go in there. But I created this image at the
I
back
like how
end of
you
that
like your
thread.
own tweets too. That's a good
I
move.
have to. I have to. I mean, yeah, it's like the desert over here. Yeah. Anyways, I'm getting back in the big in the content creation game. I've been a bit quiet, for a few years, but yeah, would appreciate some love. AI and Bitcoin, the twin pillars of a new era. Okay. So this is kind of like a bit of a thesis that I've been working on or thinking about, right? Which is how do these two things come together? So AI unleashes 100x creativity and productivity, a relentless force of human potential. So what this means is like we become superhuman. When we learn how to use AI, we essentially, like, compared to somebody from 100 years ago, we are superhuman. Um, but then Bitcoin is the other half of that equations, right? So Bitcoin is this unyielding bedrock, the most secure money ever forged, preserves that value across generations. So we have, in my view, in the next 5 years or so, have this like unprecedented opportunity to create an unimaginable amount of wealth, right? That will be essentially the function of creativity and productivity. But then Bitcoin gives us this like bedrock to capture that value that we'll be creating and essentially lock it in for multi-generations. So very, very excited about both these technologies. And Matador, you brought it up earlier, as we obviously focus a lot on Bitcoin. There's a company called Sapien that I've been helping out with. That people should check it out, sapien.io or game.sapien.io. Founders are Trevor Kaverko and others. And yeah, so I've kind of had a front row seat with regard to the AI kind of movement. But I wanted to share one thing before we let people go. Yeah. And normally I wouldn't do this on an interview, but because you're like a friend and we're probably going to be creating a lot more content together. We already have created a lot of content. I wanted to just switch it up a bit and share something with people that they might find valuable. So I tinker with every AI tool that's out there, like literally, like all of them, or as many as I can get my hands on. And this is, in my view, one of the most exciting kind of developments in the last year or so. It's by Google. It's called Notebook LM. Check it out yourself. But what you can do is you can feed up to, well, it used to be 50, but now up to 300 sources. So what I did for this example is I am a bit of a fanboy of Michael Saylor. And so I fed it every Michael Saylor interview, 2 hour, 3 hour long interview that I could find, his Wikipedia page, his strategy website, outputs from like LLMs that I could like long form stuff. I mean, anything and everything I could think of, I fed it into this Google LM or Notebook LM. And then now when I ask it a question, it's actually there's no hallucination. It's all based on that content. So if I say, what are Sailor's, top three tweets, or no, sorry, quotes on Bitcoin and energy specifically, yeah? So I mean, you could ask some LLM that, right? But maybe it'll hallucinate, maybe it'll get it, maybe it won't. But this is all based on stuff that he literally said. So Bitcoin is digital
Yeah,
energy.
incredible.
Bitcoin mining is monetization. I could be like, hey, write a blog, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, you can do anything now, but it's all based on that. And then the final piece here is I was showing Kyle right before we hit record, is they've got this insane, insane tool where you just click generate and within 81 sources. So imagine how many words there are in just like a 3 hour video alone. Now imagine 81 of these sources. I just click a button, and what Notebook LM does is it creates a podcast between a man and a woman that talk about the topic that I put in here. Now, you can also customize it and say, "Hey, I want you to focus on Bitcoin and energy and as it pertains to Michael Saylor." And it'll literally be this like 20-minute engaging conversation about the content that I fed it. So, insane, crazy to think about. I think we're at the end of our hour, so I'm not going to do the
Amazing.
demo,
Yeah,
but I'll
Sonny,
save it for another one. Yeah.
incredible, buddy.
Cool. Any final remarks? Or are we good? Bring this one to a close.
Let's go. Let's grow. Appreciate you.
Love it. Okay, so I'm gonna stop recording.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Till next time.